course, Dubuque is the oldest city in the state of Iowa, and it developed beginning in the early 1830s. Settlers came to the Dubuque area mostly for the lead mining. And so because of its advantageous location on the river and with the surrounding bluffs, there was a lot of wood that could be harvested for lumber, for fuel, for all sorts of purposes for a growing settlement. And so Dubuque became a center for the lumber industry. The history of the Millwork District is really dominated by two large millworking companies. They both kind of established themselves around the same time, but the first one that established themselves we call the Caradco Company. It was Cartwright Adams and Company. They developed the construction, the fabrication of wood doors, wood window sashes, trim, moldings, things like that for building construction materials. Another millworking company, which we now know as Farley and Letcher, was established by Christian Letcher, who was an immigrant from Switzerland who came to Dubuque in the 1870s. But both of these, both Caradco and Farley and Letcher, grew to be, they both kind of considered themselves the largest millworking company in the United States. Both of them made that claim. And between those two companies, Dubuque was probably one of the largest millworking centers in the world.
The story of Dubuque's Millwork District tells the story of the entire town. For more than a century, lead mining and lumber boomed, and settlers built a town around them. The district became the engine of the community, and today it is being reactivated to match modern living.
The Millwork District is about 1 million square feet, so about a 17-block area. The Rouse and Dean Foundry, which is just across the street from us, that is known to be the oldest building in the district. But we are in the Caradco building, AKA the Schmidt Innovation Center, and this particular building is actually 6 buildings that were all infilled, joined at one time. And the construction on the first building started in the late 1860s, and the last building was completed in 1909. So it was quite a span of time to create the structure that we see today.
When you're looking at this particular district, the architectural style it's not necessarily a high architectural style. It's what we call vernacular. There are not a lot of architect-designed buildings in the Millwork District. They are buildings that were designed many times by either someone within the company. Christian Letcher, for example, was reputed to have designed most of the buildings that Farley and Letcher were in. You could tell that they really prided themselves in the design of their buildings when they built these industrial buildings. They all are very cohesive in design. There are lots of architectural elements to the design of the buildings. Particularly with Caradco, we see the main Caradco building has the 2 arches on the north facade and then the south facade, and then there's like a tunnel that you can walk through, and then it takes you into the courtyard. And then when they built in 1924, they built the building to the north, which we now call the Voices Building or the Dubuque Building. That also has an arch on its south facade. And when you look then either from the south or to the north, you can look through these 2 large buildings, and you can kind of see how they would have done their manufacturing process. It was, they were able to move very easily, from building to building. The other thing that was distinctive about the Millwork District from a circulation standpoint was that there were several catwalks or passages that spanned the street. So you could go from one building to another on the inside of the building. You didn't have to go outside. And there's really only one remnant of that left in the district. It's the multi-level catwalk that spans from the Voices / Dupaco building to the Novelty Ironworks building. And that was constructed in the early 1900s because those two buildings were connected they were both Cradco buildings.
In the early years of Millwork District, artificial lighting wasn't available, so all of the buildings built in the 1800s incorporated large windows that could be used to vent hot air and noxious fumes. Additionally, nearly every building incorporated rooftop monitors in order to bring natural light to the center of the structure. Possibly the most important feature of each building was the masonry work with brick and limestone, a critical decision that saved the district multiple times from cascading fires.
Within the buildings, there are also fire breaks. There are multiple masonry walls that divide the building. There are fire doors that if there is a fire, then those doors are shut so the fire can't go from one part of the building to the next. So the masonry construction, it's beautiful, but it also serves as a functional purpose.
While boasting to be the hub of lumber milling in the world, Farley and Letcher legitimately constructed the world's largest indoor lumber storage facility at the corner of Washington and 7th. A towering building constructed with 60-foot timbers and enough space to house a year's worth of materials. As big as a stadium, even more impressive to learn is it was first erected more than 300 miles south.
It was the St. Louis Exposition, and it was a timber frame structure, a large pavilion. And when the exposition was over, Mr. Farley had attended the exposition, and he ended up purchasing the timber frame, which was taken down piece by piece, hauled up here on a railroad line, and they had to tie cars together because the timbers were so long that they exceeded the length of one car. So brought that all that timber up here, erected it down here, a block south of us, and then they bricked the building on the exterior of the timber frame.
For nearly 150 years, the Millwork District thrived as the industrial heartbeat of Dubuque. However, following World War II, construction methods shifted across the country, with lumber falling out of favor, being replaced by steel and other durable materials. By the 1970s, both Cradco and Farley and Letcher were a thing of the past, and buildings across the Millwork District started to close for good.
There was a process back in 2005 called Envision 2010, and basically what it was getting the input from tri-state citizens on what they wanted to see happen by the year 2010. So they came up with a list of, oh my gosh, I think it was over 3,500 projects or something. And then there was a task force formed to whittle it down to 10 projects. And among those 10 was the redevelopment of this warehouse district.
The amazing thing about it is it really is one of the most intact historic industrial areas, not only in the state of Iowa, but throughout the Midwest. In a city the size of Dubuque, to have this much historic fabric in an industrial area is just amazing.
With Envision 2010 showing the local desire to reclaim the Millwork District, developers started to think of ways to revitalize the area. By 2011, the Millwork District's first redevelopments were in place, with 72 apartments available in the Cradco building, with 75,000 square feet of commercial space open below. While not industrial millworking, lead smelting, or ironwork, the reactivated Millwork District certainly retains the energy of its history.
Yeah, so now with the redevelopment of this whole district, the character of the district has changed dramatically. And so I see more and more, as I'm driving around in the morning, I see people walking from the northern residential areas walking to work or bringing their bikes to work. So this becomes then a more walkable city. It becomes an area where there are a lot of different business and economic activities for people because more people live downtown. So the restaurants are busier. The bars are busier, the retail shops are busier. So we hope to see more and more of that. Almost kind of becomes a snowball effect.
The Millwork District is once again writing the story of Dubuque. And while this chapter is alive and well, it is still a long way from being complete.
There's a lot of buildings, a lot of work that has taken place in the district, but there's a lot more work that still needs to happen. And even though all this work has been going on for just over 10 years, we all knew it was a marathon, not a sprint. It was going to take a long time to be able to do all the work that's necessary in this district to bring it back.
We kind of see Dubuque as a special place, not only because of its wonderful historic buildings, but because we do have the ethic of historic activation, making buildings active and work for people, but then also working together to make these things happen. These buildings will still be here in 200 years, most likely. They're really treasures. They can unpack so much opportunity and so much economic development, so much vitality for communities like Dubuque.